So now we go to the second component or element of the internal control system. So this is the control activities. When you say control activities, these are the policies and procedures, no, in short, that help ensure that the management directives are carried out. So meaning what would be the strategy in order for us to achieve our goals, no, or yung goals ng organization. So this a control activity would be the helpful factor in order for us to really carry out those directives set by the management. And these are also implemented to address the risk identified during the risk assessment process. So, meaning during the risk management process, there are steps involved, no? And if there are risks that we have identified, we should know what control activities that can help lessen or would rather be the response to those risks. It can either be we can mitigate those risks, meaning to lessen the risk. We can also accept. We can also transfer this risk, no, or what we call the risk sharing. And of course, we can also exploit risk if this risk will provide opportunity for the organization. Okay? So, whether automated or manual, these control activities are applied at different levels of the entity. So kahit operations, no, kahit man middle management, kahit man executive, controls are still should be present, no. And of course, it's not mere just present lang siya. It should also be operating effectively. Okay? And these controls can also be applied to different stages of the processes. So meaning kahit yung process na kalikliitan, for example, for operations or for the production, no, we can apply different controls. Okay? The control activities may either be preventive or detective. When you say preventive, you want to deter the bad event from happening, no? Kasi if that event will happen, it will not help us really in achieving the objectives of the organization. Okay? So we want to prevent that. No, we want to deter that. Then next we have also detective. When we say detective, once the bad event happened, what can we do in order for us to lessen the impact of this risk? No? Kasi it's possible that this risk already happened and there's already an impact. What can we do in order to probably lessen? It can also avoid, no? What more, we can also share this risk, no? There are many possibilities, of course, in lessening the impact of this risk. Okay? Also, an example of a control activity is what we call segregation of duties, meaning we want to segregate the duties of ARC, the authorization, recording, and custody for proper accountability. Okay? Next, also, we have three principles that relate to control activities. No? The first one is that the organization selects and develops control activities that contribute to the mitigation of risk to the achievement of objectives to acceptable levels. Of course, there are some activities that we can put in place in order for us to mitigate the risk. Okay. So the second one, the organization selects and develops general control activities over technology to support the achievement of the objectives. Now we're talking about the general control activities over technology. These are controls in general that can be what you call this applied over what we call the information technology. Okay. Of course, we have also specific controls, but we're talking about what controls can we put in order for us to help the achievement of our objectives in terms of the usage of technology. Okay, these are not specific as to application, but rather in general sense. Now, we also have another principle that the organization deploy control activities through policies that establish what is expected and procedures that put these policies into action. Okay, so as we have mentioned earlier, that in order for us to achieve the objectives of the organization, the policy set by the board of directors will be of great help for us to really know what the management would want or that is expected from us in order for us to help them in achieving the objectives of the organization. And if this policy is now set, what procedures can we put in place in order to put this policy set by the board of directors to put into an action? Okay? So, the next would be what are the control activities relevant to audit? So, we have here an acronym, what we call PIPS. No? For the first one, performance review. So, when you say performance review, um, a strong accounting system should have controls that independently check the performance of the individuals or process in the system. So it can be the performance of an individual, and it can also be the process of the system itself. Okay? So so an example of this would be we have set the budgets, no, in the planning stage, and then with the actual results, we compare the actual results with what has been indicated in the budget. Okay, then there should be an independent check of the performance that has been done. Okay, some examples include comparing again, no, the actual performance with the budgets, of course with forecast and prior period performance, so meaning the historical performance. Also included here, investigating the relationship of operating and financial data, followed by the analysis. So more of analytical procedures. Next would be investigation of unexpected difference. So there would be at times that there are some expectation, and of course if we did not achieve that expectation, there is of course an expected difference, and through that we need to investigate. Okay, also would be investigation of the corrective action that we uh, made, no, if there are some deviations from the set plans or budgets. And of course, an example would be reviewing functional or activity performance as to what are the plans for that department or function. Nasunod ba siya, no? Nasunod ba yung plano? Kung hindi, actually what went wrong during the process, no? So that is a performance review. Okay? The next one would be the second acronym, the I, which means information processing controls, which includes authorization and document-based controls. So here, a variety of controls are used to check the accuracy, okay, the completeness, and authorization in the processing of transactions. So please do remember here that in the processing of transactions, we need to consider its accuracy, no? Of course, you want, before it can be processed, no, yung transaction, we want it to be accurate. And also, as to the details, it should be complete. And if we are to process a transaction, it should be authorized by someone. Okay? The two broad categories of information systems control activities are what we call the general controls and the application controls. When we say general controls, this relate to the overall information processing environment and include controls over data center and network operations, system software acquisition, change and maintenance. It also includes here controls for access security and application system acquisition, development, and maintenance. So that are the example of controls relating to general controls. For example, again, no, an entity's controls for developing new programs for existing accounting system should include adequate documentation and testing before its implementation. So in other words, before we can make some improvement to an existing or current accounting system, we need proper documentation, meaning what are the changes made, no, what are the for example, not really changes made, what are the new features of that program. So we need to document, and maybe included in the documentation are how to use the new program. Okay, so we also need to document also the testing made before this new system can be implemented. Okay, that's for the general controls. Now we go to the application controls. When you say application controls, this apply to the processing of individual applications and help ensure the occurrence or the validity the completeness and accuracy of transaction processing as mentioned earlier. So in here we have two examples. Number one, the entity should have controls that ensure that each transaction that occurs in an entity's accounting system is properly authorized. So again, we want to make sure that the transaction that we want to be processed is properly authorized by a appropriate authority. Second, that the entity should assign the document and record so that all relevant information is captured in the accounting system. Okay? So next control activity relevant to the audit is what we call the physical controls. When I say physical controls, these controls include the physical security of assets. So meaning yung controls over the asset, no? Yung mismong kanyang kung hindi man logic, no, it's the physical control. No? Physical controls include adequate safeguards such as secured facilities, authorization for access to computer programs and data files, and periodic counting of assets such as inventory and comparison to control records. When we say secured facilities, as much as possible, we want the assets of the company be in a more secured area wherein hindi siya susceptible sa nakaw, hindi siya susceptible sa man-made disasters, no, like flood, earthquake, no. Sana may ganong feature yon. Okay, also in here includes authorization for access to computer programs and data files, meaning those only who are authorized to have a direct access to the server or data files of the organization, dapat may nakaset tayong policy for that. Okay? Also, physical control would include your physical count of inventory. Meaning, for example, we are using perpetual inventory system. And you want to make sure that the records, no, is also what do you call this, equal to what has been counted during the physical count, no? Hindi lang siya kay perpetual, pwede rin kay periodic. Okay, mas applicable ang physical count kay periodic kasi using perpetual, remember, every sale and purchase nag-update yung inventory, while for the periodic it uses purchase account, no, and mandatory yung ating physical count to make sure what has been recorded in the records, no, or in the subsidiary ledger, inventory subsidiary ledger, is equal to the actual count. Okay? So, ito yung sinasabi ko. The last one would be your segregation of duties, no? In here, it is important for an entity, no, to segregate the authorization of transactions, the recording of transactions, and the custody of the related assets. So, in short, the ARC authorization, no, recording, and custody. Okay? Sa ibang book, actually, included here is also a reconciliation. Okay? Pero, in general, tatlo yung ating supposedly na dapat segregated ang functions. Okay? So in here, independent performance of each of these functions reduces the opportunity for any person to be in a position to both to do perpetration and conceal errors or fraud in the normal course of his or her duty. So kasi if a person has two functions, no, like let's say for example may recording siya, at the same time may custody, it's possible na may vulnerability or susceptible to theft yung ating assets, no, kasi if you have the record and you have the custody, you can do some manipulation or modification, no, para makuha mo yung or misappropriate mo yung asset. Okay? For example, if an employee receives payment from customer, no, on account and has access to the accounts receivable ledger, so meaning same kanina, no, meron siyang pwede siya makareceive ng payment, so custody, at the same time may access siya sa ER subsidiary ledger o yung record, no, it is possible for that employee to misappropriate the cash and cover the shortage in the accounting records. So that are the control activities relevant to the audit. Okay? So, what are the categories of control activity? So, ito yung kanina na-mention ko, no? Preventive, detective, directive, and compensating. So, in general, ito talaga yung mga common control activities. Again, when you say preventive, these are the activities that act before the error or omission can occur and reduce the likelihood and or impact of the event. So, meaning we want to deter the bad event from happening. Okay? So, for the next one, detective, it is a control that identify errors or anomalies after they have occurred. So, yun nga, kung nangyari na yung bad event and um, it is a sign for us to we can provide a response in order to lessen the impact of the bad event. Okay? So, we can do that through corrective action. Okay? When you say directive, these are the controls that are temporary and implemented to redirect employee actions. They are sometimes referred to as also corrective actions because they are put in place when an undesirable action has occurred, even when there were preventive and detective controls in place. For example, if employee have received training instructing them uh, to tether themselves to the handrail when walking on a scaffold more than 10 feet high, yet employees are found to ignore that requirement anyway. The breach in safety protocol may compel management to have everyone attend refresher training to reinforce the importance of that requirement, and that is expected of everyone every time. So, in other words, no, directive is a good control if ever there are some kunwari, may hindi sumunod, no, sa protocol, no, that's a finding, we can do another training for them to be reminded of what needs to be done, no, in order for us not to have another incident. Maganda kung hindi nga nangyari yung ganung incident. What if in the future, no, may unang naging pasaway, then yung iba sinasabi, but hindi naman niya sinusunod. So, bakit pa kami susunod din? So, siguro kasi wala pang nangyayaring hindi maganda. Ngayon kung may mangyaring hindi maganda, doon talaga sila matatakot, and we don't want that to happen, no? Another example could be employees who went through orientation and were told that sexual harassment is unacceptable, yet some engage in sexual harassment in workplace in any way. In this case, all employees could be sent to sexual harassment training to remind them of the importance of adhering to the company's policy. So whenever there are again instances of happening, no, or event that could violate or breach a policy, no, retraining is a good control, no. And most likely ang isang example natin ng directive is when you guys attend the orientation, kasi in there you are introduced of what are the company policies and procedures, no, for some scenarios. So you are being directed to the norm or the expected behavior that should be that you should be acting during your stay in the organization. Okay? So it's a control ha, yung directive. Directive control could also be policy and procedure. Okay? Union. Okay? So another would be your compensating. Compensating or mitigative controls are those that are put in place when a control is not where it is expected as proper design would stipulate. No? For example, dito siguro kunari yung ating mga preventive or detective controls such as segregation of duty ay hindi effective, no, may possibly may collusion, then another compensating control that can be put in place is supervision. Okay, so even may maninita, no, remember that the compensating control cannot stand by itself, no, it's a compensatory control only over the ineffectiveness of preventive and detective controls. Okay? Okay, another example cited in the book, if there is a lack of segregation of duties and more employees cannot be hired to address the weakness, then a supervisory review can be implemented to verify that all transactions performed are business appropriate. Okay, so we are talking again of the supervision. This could occur in a small office where an individual make purchases, also receives the item, and performs bank reconciliation. So it's really a violation of segregation of duties. So this employee could make inappropriate purchase without detection. So to mitigate this risk, no, the district manager could review all purchases periodically to make sure they were appropriate, the items were delivered to the company facilities, and were put into a legitimate business use. So, ang sinasabi lang natin dito, no, kung maliit ang ating negosyo, no, maaring may mga functions tayo na medyo conflict, no? Hindi kasi natin minsan maiwasan. And what can be done, no? We can put what we call again supervision or a compensating or compensatory controls. Okay? So generally speaking, preventive controls are preferable to detective controls because detective controls are important and useful. They identify issues after the fact. So meaning the error already happened. Okay, so I mean it's after the fact na yung detective. It's better that we have an effective preventive control. Okay, meaning we can already deter the bad event from happening. Okay? So when issues are identified after they occur, they must be corrected. So yun yung downfall lang talaga ng detective control. Once we already detect the errors, we need to correct it, and we need to reprocess the transactions so they create what we call rework. Preventive controls, on the other hand, thwart the problems from occurring. So activities are performed one time only. The general objective in all operating units and activities should be done once, done right. Okay? And now we go to the third component of the internal control system, which is called the information systems and communication. So first we go to the information system. When you say information system, it is consists of infrastructure such as the physical and the hardware components. So it's more of the tangible part. Then another component, no, including in the information system is what we call the software or the logical aspect of the system or the intangible part, no. That can I mean this can be your programs, okay? And also included in the information system is of course the people who will use the IS. We also have here the procedures, whether it could be a manual and automated. And lastly, of course, for us to use the information system, we need the data. Remember that the data, in order to be useful, it should be processed, that should be turned into an information. Okay? So, the information system relevant to the financial reporting objective includes the accounting system. And it consists of the procedures, again, whether automated or manual, and records the established to initiate, okay, authorize, record, process, and report an entity's transactions, and to maintain the accountability for the related assets and liabilities. So, in here, it's the usual, kung yung ginagawa natin sa manual accounting, it is being automated. Okay? Of course, hindi naman talaga mawawala yung manual portion in the information system. There would always be a manual part, no? Lalo na if we are, of course, printing documents and then we need to have it approved, or rather, if there are any documents that we need to route, no, to the customer or supplier, then yun yung manual part of doing process, no, in the information system. Okay? Now, for an effective accounting system, it gives appropriate consideration to establishing methods and records that will, number one, no, identify and record all valid transactions. Okay? Of course, to have a good record, no, I mean, sino ba naman yung ayaw ng accounting system na ang record niya wherein only valid transactions yung mapaprocess. Of course, not all transactions are valid. Let's say, for example, there are missing value. Kunwari, for a transaction to be processed in an accounting information system, it should be a financial transaction, meaning it should have an amount, and at the same time dapat meron siyang effect as to the elements of the financial statements such as the assets, liabilities, expense, income, and capital. Okay? And also included here is we need to also describe on a timely basis the transaction in sufficient detail to permit proper classification of transaction for financial reporting. Okay, so we need to also to classify here what transaction um, in this scenario could have an effect on the accounts relating to accounting. Let's say for example, the assets, the liabilities, again, the expense, the revenue, and the capital. Okay? Let's say for example, ang pwede nating ilagay dito is dapat timely of course yung pag-record natin ng transaction. If we are to record the receipt of the customer's payment, of course, ang alam nating ma-affect yung account is the asset. Okay? Well, as to the specific account, it should be the cash and the accounts receivable accounts. Okay? Next also, measure the value of transactions in a manner that permits recording their proper monetary value in the financial statement. Okay? Of course, ito kailangan talaga ng value, remember, in recording financial transactions in the accounting information system. Okay? So, as much as possible, we want to have a value on that transaction. No? Madali lang siya, kunwari, very straightforward. It mentions the amount. Okay? Of course, with regard to estimates, we need to consider some of the factors according to standards. Okay? Also, we need to determine the time period in which transactions occurred to permit recording of the transactions in the proper accounting period. No, ito yung tinatawag nating we need to determine in what period specifically nag-happen or nag-transpire yung transactions in order for us to know the appropriate or the proper timing. Okay, we want our revenue to be recorded in the period that that we really earn them, no? Okay. Next, also to properly present transactions and related disclosures in the financial statement. Okay, so if there are transactions that warrant a disclosure according to standards, then the record should provide you that detail or information. Okay. Of course, you will be needing some documents to support your disclosures related to that amount. Okay. So, for that information system, now we go to the communication. Well, in here, communication involves providing an understanding of individual roles and responsibility pertaining to internal control over financial reporting. So, dito pwede nating i-relate yung we know that communication is the key. Just like in relationship, with no communication, diba parang ang hirap minsan malaman ko ano yung gusto mong malamang bagay about your partner, right? So, sorry for stating that kind of example. But, of course, in here, no, as the auditor, we want to understand ano ba yung iba't ibang roles and responsibility na meron ng mga persons involved over the internal control relating to financial reporting. Of course, hindi lang doon naman hanggang doon yun. No? Of course, what are the other related function in relation to financial reporting yung parang connect niya, no? Kung ano yung essence ng function isang department, no? Kung ano yung essence ng isang activity over financial reporting, no? We want to understand that also. Okay? So hanggang saang extent yung activity na meron sila that would have also an effect to the financial reporting. Okay? So, if ever merong exceptions na makita no during the course of audit, we can then report that to the appropriate higher level within the entity. So in here, policy manuals, accounting, and reporting manuals, memoranda communicate policies and procedures to the entity's personnel. So in here, communications can also be made electronically, orally, or through the actions of the management. So it can be explicitly be given no through electronic means such as email. Okay, ngayon pwede nga through messaging app, di ba? And orally, if we are having a meeting, okay, to the management, and of course, it can also be impliedly through the actions of management. Now, during board meeting, you can sense if the board is not in favor of a decision. So, through that, they also convey a meaning to that, and that is also a way of communicating their side, no, kung makikita mo if they are disagreeing with that decision, no, makita mo yung um, gesture nila, right? So yun, it's also a way for them to communicate to us na they are in favor or not of that kind of scenario. Okay, so in here, a well-designed information system that is operating effectively can reduce the risk of material misstatement. This is very true. Okay? Kung siya ay operating effectively, meaning with regard to design and its implementation and of course the operation, it will definitely reduce the risk of any material misstatement. In here, the auditor must learn about each business process that affects significant account balances in the financial statement. Okay? This includes understanding how transactions are initiated and authorized, how documents and records are generated, and how the documents and records flow to the general ledger and financial statement. So, in short, no, it is better that we can use here what we call the flow charts, no, for us to basically understand the nature of the business of the organization. Okay? So understanding the information system also requires knowing how IT is involved in data processing. So up to what extent yung kanilang involvement in terms of the processing or data processing meron ang isang organization. The auditor should also understand the automated and manual procedures used by the entity to prepare the financial statement and the related disclosures. So, in here also, high quality information must be communicated appropriately. This interdependency is why COSO combines information and communication in this component. Okay? So now you see the connect between the two. No, the information being communicated to the appropriate parties. No, that is why they are combined in this component. Okay, relevant, accurate, and timely information must be available to individuals at all levels of an organization who need such information to run the business effectively. Okay, so remember those attributes. Relevant, so relevant in their um, information need, no? Accurate meaning that there is no error in terms of the information that should be given to them, and timely in a sense that the information considers the relevancy of time. Okay? Information must be provided to specific personnel as appropriate to support the achievement of their operating, reporting, and compliance responsibilities. So, of course, the information that should be provided to each of these person, no, we don't want them to be overwhelmed, no, meaning we are not giving them all the information that is available. We can only provide them information that is required for them to do their responsibilities accordingly. Additionally, communication must take place more broadly relative to expectations, responsibilities of individuals and groups, and other important matters. Communications with external parties are also important and it can also provide critical information on the functioning of controls. These parties include but are not limited to these are your customers, suppliers, of course, service providers, regulators, external auditors, and shareholders. Okay, so of course, kung ano yung need ng ating users, no, or the other parties involved, no, um, it is very critical yung controls over that information. Lalo na kung pinag-usapan natin is we are giving information to regulators. Okay? If you are giving them wrong information, then most likely, no, I mean, the organization is giving a wrong information. Most likely, they are not complying with the applicable rules and regulations or even the law. Okay? So, in here, clearly, the culture of an organization plays an important role in communicating its priority. So, it will also depend on the culture. If they have a high regard again with ethics, of course, you would be it would be definitely it would manifest in their communication. Okay? Typically, organizations that have established a culture of integrity and transparency have an easier time with communication than do other organization. Of course, kung may regard sila sa ethical culture, given like this one, no, they have a culture of integrity and transparency. So, what is currently present in the information system, well, definitely they can present it, no, to the people, no? I mean, relevant people in terms of communication. Okay, so madali lang sa kanilang magbigay ng information kung may ganoon silang regard with that kind of ethical culture. Ngayon, kung wala, no, you would expect that the information would be, not really less of integrity and transparency, but there is a question as to its reliability, of course. Okay. So now we go to the fourth component of the internal control system, which is the monitoring. When you say monitoring, no, to allow for the continuous improvement and consider changes in the entity's operating environment, the management needs to monitor its internal control system. So in here we have the two fundamental principles of monitoring, which includes ongoing and separate evaluation. So in here, ongoing evaluations of controls that are separate from other types of evaluations enable management to determine whether the other components of internal control continue to function over time. So parang monitoring also encompasses the other components. Okay? Relative to time, if we want the components of the internal control system to be effective, we need to do some mechanism, we need to check or evaluate, if it really um, relevant in such timing. Okay. So next we have also here reporting deficiencies. In here, internal control deficiencies are identified and communicated in a timely manner to those parties for taking corrective action and to management and the board as appropriate. Okay? So through monitoring, we can check if what has been given by the management or what has been implemented by the management to address certain issues, no, is really well being implemented, no. And if not yet implemented, then there's a status that we can say, no, as auditors, that the management is still has this ongoing um, implementation of the solution to the problem, or rather, if the management didn't take any action with regard to correcting the issue, they can do also reporting that they can do so, no, reporting that kind of deficiency. It is important to note that monitoring does not include regular management and supervisory control activities and other actions that employees take in performing their everyday duties. Effective monitoring involves ongoing evaluation of the controls. Some common monitoring controls include number one, no, periodic evaluation of controls by the internal audit. Number two, analysis of and appropriate follow-up of operating reports or metrics that might identify anomalies indicative of a control failure. Then next also, supervisory review of controls such as reconciliation reviews as a normal part of processing. Okay, so yung reconciliation is also a monitoring control in order for us to check um, if there are any items na hindi natin nakita, no? Lalo na if it is being done by the if it is being checked, no, yung ating reconciliation by a supervisor. Okay? Next, you also have your self-assessment by the board and the management regarding the tone that they set in the organization and the effectiveness of their oversight functions. Okay, so that is also a monitoring control, their self-assessment. Okay. Then next we also have here the audit committee inquiries of internal and external auditors with regard also to any update or progress of their engagements. And also we have here quality assurance reviews of the internal audit department. As you can see, some of the control activities explained also serve as monitoring activity. For example, analyzing customer complaints for follow-up is a control activity, but analyzing them to determine whether the complaints result from a weakness in other controls is a monitoring activity. Okay? Although the proceeding procedures provide management daily monitoring opportunities, the oversight provided to the entity by the board of directors, no, provides the highest level of monitoring. So most likely, if the oversight function really is over this kind of monitoring or activity, that's the highest level. Okay? Ongoing monitoring activities of small and mid-sized entities are more likely to be informal and are typically performed as a part of the overall management of the entity's operations. Management's close involvement in operation often will identify significant variances from expectations and inaccuracies in financial operations and compliance data. So it also depend on the size of the entity. So most likely, if the size is larger, no, mga corporate, so most likely more formal ang monitoring, no? If it is a small or mid-sized entity, meaning most likely the management is heavily involved in monitoring the operations, no, to check if there are some deviations, no, from the budget or the expectations set by the board of directors. Okay. So next we go to the risk management, no. Well, nauna na tong risk management kasi the last component of the internal controls also talks about risk assessment. Okay, so first things first, no. What is risk? Risk under COSO is the possibility that event will occur and affect the achievement of a strategy and objectives. No, it can be a positive or a negative one. When you say positive, it is more likely that the event will really help us in achieving the strategy and objectives, while a negative one will really not, it will deter the achievement of the strategy and the objectives. So organizations ordinarily face a variety of risks from internal and external sources that threaten their ability to meet their objectives in the areas of operations, reporting, and compliance. Okay? So most likely, tawag dito, yung source ng ating risk, no, hindi lang siya sa external. Hindi lang siya for internal, pwede rin external, no? It could also affect the organization in a way. So, ano yung mga examples nating external event that might tawag dito, that might lead the organization in not achieving the objectives. For example, yung mga disasters, right? So, yung mga tipong ganun. Example, heavy scrutiny of the regulator. So, for example, BIR is currently auditing our tax obligations. No? Mga tipong ganun. some would be internal sources such as errors, no, fraud, no, pwede rin yon. Okay? So please take note that risk is a concept used by auditors and managers, no, to express concerns about the probable effects of an uncertain environment. So remember, no, in your financial management, sometimes there are uncertainties na meron ng ang ating mga investment, no. You can say na this kind of investment will really give you good returns, no, nor it will give you losses in the future. Okay? So, through the concept of risk, no, kung nafo-foresee nila, no, na merong threat or vulnerability yung isang activity or isang control activity, okay, that would help us in achieving the objectives of the organization, then probably, no, kung may ganun tayong anticipation, we can put controls, no, if ever there are no controls present, or probably we can enhance the controls currently in place, no, in the organization. Okay, so this assessment is management's process, no, for identifying, no, analyzing and responding to such risk. So remember this process, no, identifying the risk, no, ano ba yung mga risk na present currently in the organization or possibly might be present or pwedeng emerging, meaning what risk that can be what that can threaten the organization, no, pwedeng let's say for example COVID-19 is an emerging risk, di ba? So after we identify this risk, we need to analyze this risk, no, we need to check if what its impact, no, if ever this risk happen, and what is the likelihood of its happening, no, in terms of effect to the organization, no? Kasi possible na yung likelihood niya pwedeng mangyari pero yung kanyang impact low, no? Maaari pong ganon. And if we have analyzed this risk, so what can we do to respond to the risk that we have identified and analyzed? Okay? In performing effective risk assessment, no, organization should number one, no, clearly specify the objectives to allow the identification and assessment of risk related to those objectives. So yun yung starting point natin. So what are the objectives of the organization? Once we have identified the objectives of the organization, we need to check what risk, no, that could possibly um, have an effect in achieving these objectives, no? Possible kasi na hindi natin ma-achieve yung objective na yon. So, ano yung mga risk na yon? Okay? So, after we have identified the risk again, we need to analyze, no, the risk, no, to the achievement of its objectives to determine how they may be managed. So, in here, we need to do risk analysis. Again, how do we measure how do we analyze those risks through impact, no, and likelihood, no. Once we determine its impact and likelihood, no, we can now determine, no, how we should manage those risks, no. Also, consider potential fraud relating to the achievement of objectives. It is possible that we have set here the objectives and there is also a potential fraud, no, indicator that would, of course, not help us in achieving the objectives. Okay? So, after we consider the potential fraud factor, we need to identify and assess changes that could impact internal control. Okay? So in here, an entity's risk assessment process is its process, no, for identifying and responding to business risk. This process includes how management identifies risk relevant to the preparation of financial statement, estimates their significance, assesses the likelihood of their occurrence, and decides on how to manage them. For example, the entity's risk assessment process may address how the entity identifies and analyzes significant estimates recorded in the financial statement. So, in here also, effective risk assessment requires the establishment of performance measures to assess the achievement of objectives. So, through performance measures, no, we can possibly measure or quantify if we are really achieving the objectives, no. It's possible that we can provide some quality factors, no, pero to be more objective, no, we should have more quantifiable metrics, no, in order for us to measure the performance. This allows management to establish the risk tolerance for its various objectives and manage this risk. Risk tolerance is the acceptable level of variation in performance relative to the achievement of objective. So in here, risk tolerance, we are pertaining to the level of activity. Okay? So sometimes, no, the the I mean, on how we measure the tolerance, no, we can give reference to what losses can the certain function or department might be able to handle. Okay, so for example, no, yun nga, yung isang department na sabi nila, they cannot tolerate uh, a 50,000 loss kasi they are targeting something. So that can be a way to measure the risk tolerance, no. It will really depend on the organization. Of course, on how would they quantify the risk tolerance. Now, most likely this will be based on amounts. Sometimes it can be based on qualitative factors. Let's say for example, if this risk will happen, no, and it will really have a negative publicity or an adverse effect on the reputation of the organization, so most likely they will not tolerate this kind of risk in from happening, no. Of course, kung medyo risky yung kanilang magiging activity, they would also consider or weigh the options, no, or ano ba yung trade-offs nito. Okay? So risk may exist at the entity level or at a transaction level. No, entity level risk arises from external or internal factors such as economic, no, regulatory, technology, and personal factors. While for the transaction levels are found within the divisions, operating units, or functions of the organizations. So you are actually looking onto the its uh, level, no. Let's say for example, the risk would be coming from regulations, no, from the technology, or in the economy, or coming from the economy. Let's say for example, kung medyo mataas yung inflation ng economy, no, or mataas yung inflation rate, no, that is an entity level risk, no. So you see it parang more of a macro level. Now with transaction level, so medyo micro to. So possibly may effect lang sa isang division, operating unit, or functions of the organization. Okay? So in here, assessing risk involves evaluating again of the likelihood of occurrence and its potential impact. It also involves the consideration of the velocity or the speed of occurrence and the duration of impact of the risk. This assessment allows the management to identify the significant risks that require a response. So most likely, what we're saying here, kapag mataas yung kanyang risk, let's say for example, it's medium or high, so most likely that would require a response. Hindi natin sinasabi na parang hindi porket significant siya, no? Let's say for example, insignificant, wala nang response, no? It's possible na mababa lang yung risk niya, pero there's a response that we can accept that risk or that we can eventually mitigate the effect of the impact of its of the said risk, no. Pero ang gusto lang i-point dito is kung mataas yung significant risk, yun yung parang priority natin that would require an immediate response. Okay? Kung low risk, may response pero hindi immediate yung deployment of the response. Okay? So now we go to the different types of risk. So remember that the risk begins with the strategy formulation and setting of business objectives. An organization is in business to achieve particular strategies and business objectives, most likely, right? So represent the barriers to successfully achieving those objectives as well as the opportunities that may help achieve those objectives. Therefore, because each organization has somewhat different strategies and business objectives, they will also face different types of risk. Okay, so the next discussion will be having seven types of risk. Okay, so before I start, no, dati ang risk is only categorized or classified as only operational risk. But through the advent of time, no, and of course with the practice rin na siguro nag-usap na rin yung mga organization, no, mas naging granular na yung risk natin. Why do we have different kind of risk, no? Kasi we can set some control specific to that kind of risk. Okay? So for the first type of risk, we have here the business and the process risk. When you say business and process risk, it is the risk that the organization processes are not effectively obtaining, managing, and disposing their assets. So in other words, it's more of the usage, no, and the disposal of the asset kapag tapos na yung use ng kanyang asset. Okay, so it will fall under this kind of risk. Ito yung alam din natin na kapag ang organization is not performing effectively and efficiently in meeting the customer needs, it can be before the fact, no, or after the fact. So pwedeng currently you are doing the product or manufacturing the product or doing the service, however there is a disconnect, no, with regard to the needs of the customer, no, it also falls under this business and process risk. It is possible na during the process, no, possibly nga naman na ma-meet yung customer need, pero after some time, dahil nga may expectation yung customer na what if nangyari yung gantong scenario sa isang product or sa isang service, eh hindi niya na-meet yung need na yon or expectation na yan, that will also fall under the business and the process risk. Also included here, if it is not creating value, no, for the organization, no. Of course, here also included the it is also diluting the value by suffering the degradation of physical, financial, and information assets. Okay, so in here we also have here na-categorize pa yung each of the business and process risk. So we have a long list. So we begin with capacity risk. When I say capacity risk, it is an insufficient capacity that limits the ability to meet the demand in the short or long term, or excess capacity threatens the firm's ability to generate competitive profit margins. So medyo crucial talaga rin yung capacity. No, hindi rin natin masabi, no, possible through forecasting or planning, no, kapag hindi natin foresee or na foresee or anticipate yung possibly seasonality ng product, no, pwede tayong magkaroon ng insufficient capacity. If in case medyo over yung ating na foresee, there's also a possibility of excess capacity, no. If that is the case, no, it will definitely threaten yung ability ng ating the organization in really generating competitive profit margins. Okay? So the next one is also what we call execution risk. When you say execution risk, inability to produce consistently without compromising quality. So more of really execution talaga to, no. So in here please take note, no, medyo negative yung connotation na ating risk. So meaning in here, we want to produce consistently, no, or giving the product to the customers without really suffering the quality. Okay, kung may inability tayo with regard to giving that kind of service, no, that is an execution risk. No, next is what we call the supply chain risk. In here we mean that it is being unable to maintain a steady stream of supplies when needed. So, yun yung problem natin, no? If our products are, kunwari, medyo we are having problems or difficulties in obtaining the supply, no, or a steady stream of supply, then that is a supply chain risk. Okay, the next we have here the business interruption risk. No, this risk stems from the unavailability of raw materials, IT, skilled labor, facilities, and other resources that threaten the organization's ability and capacity to continue operation. So ito medyo in general to. No, it can come from the unavailability of the raw materials, possibly um, yung tao dito, yung problem with regard to the facility in terms of kunwari nagkaroon ng man-made disasters or nagkaroon ng electrical problem, no, or yung we have a short source of skilled labor in doing the or in manufacturing the product or even the service. So that is a business interruption risk, no. We also have here the human resource risk, meaning a lack of knowledge, skills, and experiences among the organization's key personnel that threatens the ability to achieve the business objective. So meaning, kung yung mga na-hire natin is may kulang in terms of the knowledge, no, yung experience na dapat meron sila in terms of discharging their roles and responsibility, lalo na kung ito ay taong may kataas-taasang posisyon sa organization, it's possible that it will have or it will entail us really in inability to achieve the business objectives. Okay? We also have here the product or service failure risk, meaning a faulty or non-performing products and services that do not meet customer expectation can expose the organization to customer complaints, warranty claims, returns, field repairs, product liability claims, no? Also litigation causing lost revenue, lower market share, and damage to the business reputation. So most likely, ang end na result nito, it's more of the reputation of the organization, no? Dahil kasi we weren't able to perform the products or services or the services that are expected from us, no? Uh, of course, with regard to the use of the product or the service, no, that will have a bad effect to the good reputation of the organization. So that is a product or service field risk. We also have the product development risk, which talks about ineffective product development that threatens the organization's ability to meet or exceeds customers' expectations consistently over the long term. Okay, so most likely, of course, nagkakaroon tayo ng product development of that is in response to the evolving customer needs. If we are not meeting the evolving needs of the customers, so most likely there would be an ineffective product development. Okay. Next, we also have here the cycle time risk, meaning unnecessary activities threaten the organization's capacity to develop, produce, market, and deliver goods and services in a timely manner. So we're talking more of time is of the essence. No, sorry for that. Okay. So we're talking about here the cycle time. No, if the customer are expecting this product to be delivered, no, within the stated terms, no, in the purchase order, so dapat you consider the timing, no. If the customer indicated that the product or the material should be sent to them by this period, then you should consider the time, no, the timing of really requisitioning the raw materials from the warehouse into the production all the way up to its delivery to the customer. So that is the cycle time risk. Okay? So next we also have here the health and safety risk. No, it is a failure to provide a safe working environment for workers exposes the organizations to compensation liabilities, loss of business reputation, and other costs. So, we don't want our employees to be one of the casualties, no? Kasi, as much as possible, also, we want a good working environment to our employees wherein they will be uh, working in a good condition to let them work or give them that assurance na they can work in an environment that they will be able to be I mean to give or to manufacture goods or provide service, no? So meaning parang lalo na kung ito yung mga organization na parang medyo may hazard, no? So dapat meron talagang mga ano yan na uh, controls in place lalo, no? Let's say for example, if it is a construction company, so you would expect that the employees are wearing tawag dito helmets, okay? And metal shoes, no? Para maiwasan lang yung casualty, no? Next, we also have here leadership risk. In here, workers are not being led effectively, resulting in a lack of direction, motivation to perform, customer focus, management credibility, and trust. No? So, in here, we're talking about leading the people, no? In a way na dapat I mean, they have here the sense of direction, no? Kung ano ba yung kanilang um, expected na dapat gawin coming from the leadership, no, of the heads of the organization. Okay? So with next we also have here the outsourcing risk. Outsourcing activities to parties not performing in a way that is consistent with the organization's strategies, objectives, values, and behavioral standards and expectation. So most likely may mga organization din na they would be outsourcing some of their functions. So meaning third party yung nag-handle ng some of their functions. It can be accounting, no, human resource, no, pwede ring ibang function. So most likely kung hindi sila na orient about the objectives and strategies and values and behavior standards and expectations of the organization, no, there's a risk na hindi nila ma-perform yung kanilang um, work in a way na consistent doon sa mga nabanggit natin. Okay, we also have here the competitor risk. When you say competitor risk, it is the risk that the actions by competitors may threaten the organization's competitive advantage and even its survival. Okay, so it's possible na baka mamaya aggressive yung ating competitor, no, dahil aggressive sila or possibly ano bang pwedeng aggressive, no, meron kang gantong strategy and they have this kind of competitive advantage na nagawa, no, may ganito silang ginawa ring kind of product or service, it will really threaten yung the organization in terms of its delivery of products or service. So, most likely, medyo may kinalaman dito sa survival of the organization. We also have next here the catastrophic risk. So, in here, when you say catastrophic risk, it is the risk that the catastrophe threatens the organization's ability to continue operating and provide goods and services. So most likely mga catastrophe, mga man-made disasters, again, earthquake, flood, no, and tsunami, no, if ever nga ma-happen yon, it will have an effect as to the organization's ability to continually operate and provide goods or service. Next, we also have here the industry risk. In here, when you say industry risk, it is a changing condition that affect the attractiveness of the industry. No, for example, pwede nating ibigay dito mga industry na naapektuhan ng technology. Dati, uso ang DVD and tapes. Now, dahil sa changing condition, dahil nga sa technology, ngayon uso ang online streaming. So, na-put into risk yung mga nasa industry na yun wherein eventually phase out na yung mga products na yun and nawala yung mga um, functions or departments na involved doon sa pag-produce ng product na yun. So that is an industry risk, no? So kaya nga sinasabi nga natin change is inevitable, no? We want the organization to really innovate in order for them to overcome the possible obsolescence of their products or service, no? Isang example din dito yung e-commerce, just like with Lazada, no? Zalora, 'di ba, pumasok 'yan matagal na, pero dahil sa pandemic, no, yung mga tao ba natatakot na magpunta ng mall. So saan ngayon sila pwedeng pumunta? They can do online shopping, no? That also is an industry risk. We also have here the planning risk. It is a lack of unrealistic, irrelevant, or unreliable planning information could result in a poor conclusion and decisions. This risk is often triggered when plans and budgets are unrealistic, not based on appropriate assumptions or performance metrics. It is not relevant to organization goals or unaccepted by the managers and workers. So most likely more of poor planning, no? Let's say for example, medyo unrealistic, hindi measurable yung ating mga plan, no? Hindi rin time bound, so that would have an entail in our tawag dito the next elements of the management functions, no? So that is a planning risk. We also have here the organization structure risk or organization risk. It is the organization structure does not support change, flexibility, or the organization's strategy. An ineffective organizational structure can threaten its ability to change. Okay? So that is the problem if hindi supportive ang organization in terms of changing its organizational structure or hindi siya flexible. That would really threaten them in their ability of changing their structure. Okay? So next we also have here the integrity and fraud risk. It is a risk of management or employee fraud, illegal or unauthorized acts that could result in reputation loss. In here, management fraud is the intentional misstatement of financial and operational reports that negatively affect external stakeholders' decision. Fraud could be also perpetrated by the supplier, customer, agents, and brokers against the organization for personal gain. Illegal acts committed by the manager and the employees can result in fines, penalties, sanctions, loss of licenses to operate, loss of customer, and reputation damage. So you see the negative effect or impact of the fraud, no? Kasi kung mangyayari yan, most likely hindi talaga magiging maganda yung effect talaga in terms of reputation ng organization. So please note that managing the risk of fraud and corruption is the responsibility of the management. No, audit procedures alone, even when performed with due professional care, cannot guarantee the fraud or corruption will be detected. So as mentioned, no, si internal auditor, they are not really the experts in doing fraud analysis and investigation. They can check if there are any fraud indicators and they can report it to the appropriate authority. Okay, but with regard to its investigation or further checking the case fraud facts, no, it will not be under their scope of work. Internal audit does not have the responsibility for the prevention and detection of fraud and corruption as mentioned earlier. Internal auditors will, however, be alert in all their work to risk and exposures that could allow fraud or corruption to happen. Internal audit may be requested by management to assist with fraud examination work. It's more of really assistantship lang, but not really doing the work of a fraud examination, no? Dapat kung may maggagawa ng fraud examination work or fraud investigation, it would be a fraud expert, no, or a fraud examiner na certified. Okay? Next, we also have, still under the business and process risk is what we call trademark erosion risk. It is the erosion of a trademark or brand over time that threatens the demand, no, for the organization's products and services. It allows its ability to develop and grow future revenue streams. Parang lumalabas din to, parang more of the brand eh. Let's say for example, trademark, it can be logo, no? Possible yung mga alam nating brands na wala like Nokia, 'di ba? Yung Nokia before, way back 10 years ago or 20 years ago, no? It was a leading producer of phones, no? And siguro dahil hindi sila like nag innovate, no, hindi nila nakuha agad or na-capture yung market in terms of the Android, no, and possible yung iOS ng Apple, no, nagkaroon tuloy ng erosion sa trademark ng Nokia, no, and it really has an effect on their ability to grow their revenue streams after quite some time, lalo na nung after 2010, kasi nandun na yung rise ng Android and even the iOS tawag dito software of the Mac, no. Next, no, in relation also to trademark erosion risk, we also have here the reputation risk. Now, when we say reputation risk of loss generally related to ethics, safety, security, quality, innovation, and sustainability causing lost revenue, higher capital and regulatory cost, lower stock price, or difficulties raising capital due to a potentially criminal event. Reputation risk may also cause loss of customer, profits, and the ability to compete. Actually, ito yung sinasabi ko, no? Parang ito yung catch-in basin ng lahat ng mga iba't ibang klaseng risk na nabanggit ko about possible loss of reputation, no? Ang pwede nating in general na maging example dito is kunwari yung isang organization, no, hindi niya finalo yung laws or yung laws and regulation, no, na meron sa isang country, no, it's possible that mapuput at risk yung kanilang reputation or yung kanilang name. Example natin dito is the RCBC scandal, wherein the bank is involved in the tawag dito yung I think 81 million US dollars coming from the Bank of Bangladesh, no, na napunta dito yung pera and they breach the provisions relating to anti-money laundering. Okay, so that is a reputation risk. Okay, marami pa to, no. Pwede rin in terms of health and safety rin, no. For example, may mga environmental laws, no, na kunwari the DNR are limiting the use of natural resources by this company who uses the natural resources of the country. Let's say for example, yung paggamit ng forest in terms of producing paper. Of course, kunwari pwede ring oil machinery or oil refinery, no, in terms of producing gas and oil, no. Kung sila ay nag-violate ng mga DNR regulations, most likely they would be facing reputational risk. Okay? Next, we also have here the data integrity. When you say data integrity, no, in here it talks about reliability and completeness of data flows inbound and outbound from or to customers, vendors, regulators, investors and other stakeholders. It also relates to the authorization, completeness, and accuracy of transactions as they are input, processed, and reported. So most likely, the integrity of the data, no, as much as possible, dapat siya ay authorized, no. Kung hindi siya authorized, well, there's a problem with regard to the data. It should also be complete and dapat accurate siya in a sense na there is no error. No? If the three are present, it is authorized, it is complete and accurate, most likely may integrity yung data. Next is what we call infrastructure risk. It is a risk that the organization's IT infrastructure is obsolete or lacks the IT infrastructure such as the hardware, software, networks, and people it needs to be effectively support the information requirements of the organization to remain viable in the short and long term. No? Meaning, infrastructure hindi lang siya the physical, no? Even the intangible part na software and network. Okay? So dapat 'yon ay available, no? In order for the business to be sustainable in the long and short term. Okay? So dapat nag-update din tayo as to ano ba dapat yung mga required na infrastructure, no? Kasi kung hindi, most likely kung obsolete or naglalak yung infrastructure dahil nga kulang na yung capacity, most likely may effect din ito sa ability ng organization to produce uh, the profit or revenue. Next is what we call the commerce risk. No, it is an event or events that compromise B2B or the business to business, B2C or the business to customers financial and data flows, data integrity and security. So ito most likely these are your in general naman to, no. Pwede rin kasi yung organization they have this customer or supplier that they talk to, no, that is also a business, no. Possible mga large business partners to, no, hindi siya like retail one. Okay, so there's also what we call the commerce risk. Okay, we also have here the access risk. When I say access risk, it is a failure to adequately restrict access to information that could result in unauthorized use of confidential information. Conversely, overly restrictive access to information could limit the ability of a personnel to perform their assigned responsibility. Meaning, dapat yung pag-access sa information could I mean it should only be based on the responsibility that I mean the scope of the work of the person who wants to have an access to that kind of information, lalo na kung ito ay confidential information, so dapat medyo restrictive yung access sa ganong klaseng type ng info. Pero we don't also want to be very stringent or too restrictive in giving access, no. Baka kasi mamaya malimit yung kanilang lalo na kung yung person involved should have an access to information na medyo wide yung kanyang reach or yung scope, no, and we don't want that person to really limit his or her ability to perform yung na assign responsibility sa kanya. Okay? So we also have here the availability risk. It is an unavailability of information when needed could threaten the continuity of the organization's operations and processes. So dapat, no, we kasi may ano tayo may tinatawag tayong there should be a right balance of the integrity of the data, its availability and its confidentiality. And again, relating to the access risk, we want that information to be available only to the persons who are needing that kind of information in relation to their assigned task, no. Dapat doon lang sa taong nangangailangan lang ng info yung bibigyan mo ng ganong access, no. Well, if the person would be really needing that information na due to their nature of, for like say for example, may super user access yung tao, then we could give that person that kind of access, no. Lalo na yung mga nasa handling IT functions, no. Most likely they have more accessibility over some of the functions of the system. So may mga ganun. Okay?